So first off, just to get everyone started, some Zoom guidelines for today. I know everyone's not quite used to doing everything remote, but I'd ask you to mute yourself when you're not talking. And please keep your video on if possible so we can kind of have a sense of community for everyone. We've also found that wired headphones are better for sound than the wireless headphones. And if you have any technical issues, please use the little chat function at the bottom of your screen. Shamini's actually watching that for me. And then if for some reason we get disconnected, just try and click on the link again and we'll try and start it back up. Does anyone have any questions before we get started? Can everyone hear me okay? All right, I'm going to assume that that's good to go. You also have some buttons at the bottom of the screens that look like a little thumbs up and I think a little clapping button. So if you want to use those too, that's an option for you all. So, all right. So welcome to the first day of class webinar by PFF. My name is Shelby Lamar. I'm the assistant director for the program. And we're going to be talking about the first day of class, both for on-ground classes and for online classes. So our agenda for the day is we're going to talk about what to do before the first day of class, really some of the main topics for the first day. We're going to talk about issues of attendance and roll call, and then how to create community on the first day and how to foster engagement. And so if anyone has any questions, just unmute yourself and let me know and I can pause and take any questions, or if I need to go faster or slower. So the first day of class, just a brief discussion between all of us. What is a good first day of class for you all, either as a student or a professor? What has been like a really good first day of class that you've experienced? Okay, that's all right if no one wants to join in. I can just keep going. I know for me, a good first day of class is when I felt excited, when I felt like everything just went really well as a professor. I was excited. I didn't have any huge technical issues, and my students seemed to also be enjoying themselves. And I think that was one of a good example of a first day of class for me. So how we can kind of create that is, especially on before class. So the preparation starts before the first day of class. And the first thing I would suggest you do is make sure you set up your learning management system. So for CGU, we have Canvas as a learning management system. Some of the others include Blackboard or Sakai. I believe those are the main ones that are currently being used. So I would suggest you go ahead and set that up at least a week before class starts, because your students can actually see that if you go ahead and publish it. So they get like a preview of what the class is going to be like. And just some basic things to put on your learning management system before class would be your contact information. Students might have questions before class and might need to get a hold of you because they might decide that they might be deciding what class they actually want to take. Your syllabus is also important. So making sure that they get the syllabus beforehand can also be very important to the students so that they know what to expect for the class. Is this a class they actually want to be in? The class schedule, not necessarily, you don't have to put like the whole schedule for the whole class, but letting them know like what the semester is going to look like what are you going to be covering, what are the major assignments, can be very helpful for students before class starts. I would also suggest a welcome video. Now that we move more online, even for an in-person class, you could record a welcome video for students, just kind of introducing yourself, letting them know who you are and that you're excited to be in class with them. Could be very helpful so that everyone kind of sees what you're like, and just gets a little preview of getting to know you so they can feel more welcome in the class for an on-ground class or for an online class. And you can reuse that video each year, at least for a few years, right? And then one of the other things I would suggest you do is make sure and check for errors. So some of the most common errors we find is that professors will reuse dates that aren't correct for the actual semester, or that they have misadded the points for assignments and stuff like that, and then just basic spelling errors. You want to minimize those as much as possible because those things stand out to students, especially in the beginning of class. So, and if all your dates are from a previous semester, it can show that you're not really interested in this particular class. So you want to make sure that they feel like this class is really important to you, and that way they feel like it's important to them. Okay, and then the next thing to do before the first day of class is just these two things, is communicate with your students. So there's several ways to do that. You could use an announcement tool, email, or other like social media tool if you prefer that. But just reach out to them at least once before the first day of class, and tell them what to expect on the first day. Should they be bringing computers? Should they expect that they're going to be there the whole day? Just letting them know what to expect, especially for first generation students or students where this might be their first class that they're taking in college. That can be really helpful to them, just to know kind of what's up on the first day of class. You can also introduce yourself with a short biography there, just letting them know who you are, and this is your contact information. And then also let them know about any requirements. So are they going to have to bring computers, phones? Do they need textbooks or particular software for your class? Letting them know this really lets them make a decision early on, because in the first part, before the first day of class and on the first week, they're really trying to figure out what classes they're going to stay in, which classes they're going to drop. And just giving them as much information at the start will set up a good just environment, so they know that you're going to be communicating with them clearly and often, and they know what's going on. All right, any questions on before the first day of class? All right, we'll just truck along then. So on the first day of class, it's both exciting and anxiety producing for both students and the professor. So I think as a professor, it's very exciting on your first day, but you also want to make a great impression. And it's the same for the students. They're also very excited and want to make a good impression. So one of the things that we can do to help with that is setting up like the processes and norms on the first day. So you can hand out the syllabus and go over that for sure. I think that's a great thing to do on the first day of class. But don't just stop there, because while the students do need to know all of your processes and your policies, they also need more from you on the first day. Because it's a great opportunity on the first day to actually set things up for the rest of the semester. And if you just hand out the syllabus and leave, it kind of shows that like, okay, class time isn't that valuable. So what we would suggest on the first day of class, one of the most important things to do is start building that community. So you want to create a sense of trust and like openness in the class, so that students feel like they actually belong, and they feel like you care about them and their classmates also care about them. This increases student performance both on ground classes and online classes, because if they feel like they belong, they actually do much better. They're more invested in the class. So we really want to take the first day and all the days after, but especially on the first day, to build some community. One of the other things you can do on the first day that really kind of helps is projecting who you are. So one of the things that students like to see is that you're a knowledge authority, so that what you're saying is trustworthy, it's accurate, it's correct. So that goes back to the syllabus and the learning management system. So if there's a lot of mistakes there, it comes across as either like sloppy, or maybe some of your information isn't going to be correct. So we want to make sure that those are accurate as possible. And the other is just being prepared for class. So I would say over preparing for the first day of class is not a bad thing. Being able to be confident, practice that first class, really helps you be sure that kind of have a feeling for that first day and how you want it to go. But I would also suggest having backup ideas. So like have different activities in mind, be able to be agile in case something comes up. So maybe you got a different classroom than you actually thought you were going to get. Being over prepared and like agile in your thought process can really help you manage anything that might come up in that first day and really make sure that they see you as a knowledge authority. But also show that you care. So these are the two important things. You should come off as knowledgeable, but you should also come off as caring. So you want to make sure that students think you not just care about the subject, but you actually care about them too. So if there's a lot of things you can do to do that, and I can talk about it in a minute. But if you come into class and you just have the authority piece, you can come off as cold and uncaring. A lot of people don't see that authority and care are actually both the same sides of a single coin, I guess you could say. You should be able to show emotion in class. You should be able to show that you care. And that won't take away from your authority. It will actually increase your authority. It shows that you're confident and you know what you're doing and you care about your students. So is everyone on the same page with me? Good. All right. So how do you show your students that you care? So according to Larson, he did a study in 2015. There are 7 factors that show you care as an educator. So the first is knowing your students' names. So as a professor, you should get a roster of your students' names before class. I would suggest you open that up and get to know your students' names. Often they'll have pictures, but sometimes they won't. And one thing you can do is actually try to learn to pronounce your students' names. If there's any names you're not sure of, you can look up pronunciations online. You should be aware that that might not be correct, but at least you can start trying to really make sure you know what their names are and how to pronounce them. The second,
Shelby,
yeah.
can I just say something? With international students' names, especially, or names that are very unusual, it really, really helps from the student perspective. Even if the professor says, "Can you teach me how to say your name?"
Mm-hmm.
That happens when you actually go to class. So, identifying the ones you're not sure of, and then approaching students to say, "Can you teach me?" It really shows you care. And it's really appreciated if you are from somewhere else and someone is making an effort to want to know you, as opposed to, "Can I call you Janet?" I've been asked that a few times as a student, so it helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Like they can let you know what their name is as well. But just making sure that you're showing that effort, because names are important. Names matter to people. We don't talk about that too often, but they really are important. And so displaying concern to your students. So if your students let you know that something's going on, just being concerned. That doesn't mean that, you have to necessarily make exceptions or something for that student, but actually showing that you are concerned for them really helps. Making an effort to get to know the students personally, so not just a class, but, and I can talk about more ways to do that, but getting to know who the students are. What are they wanting to do as a career? Why are they in your class? Why are they taking your class in particularly? And what is their culture? What is their situation? Can really show that you care. Making sure that your lessons and your course lines up with what they want to do it is also very important. So do you have lessons that are important for the real world? Are you showing how it actually connects to what they want to be doing? Fifth is addressing student concerns. So not only displaying concerns for what's going on, but addressing any concerns they have. Asking if they have concerns in class and letting them have discussions with your students. Sometimes for a big world event, for example, it can be good to pause and process those feelings, right? Not just pretend that they're not there. Using nonverbal expressions. So everyone really does this in general, but just, you know, how you're expressing yourself non-verbally can also be very important. Are you turning toward a student when they ask you a question? That kind of thing. And lastly, just displaying a feeling of care overall for your class and for your students. So those are the 7 factors that show you care as an educator. And I'll go over a few more ways that you can actually make that feeling of care even more prominent to your students. So does anyone know why we take roll, especially on the first day of class, like roll or attendance as educators? Nope. Okay, so on the first day of class, especially that first week or two, the university itself needs to know who's in your class usually. Because they have to report these statistics out to like the financial aid offices and stuff like that. So they need to know who's in your class. So we do need to know who's there. So it isn't something that we can usually skip, especially in those first couple of weeks. So it is important. But how do we make sure that we are taking care of our students when we do a roll call, attendance, or introductions? So there is some things, so there are some student identities that can be hurt in these interactions. And if they're hurt right at the start of class, it really makes it not feel like a community to them. So we want to be careful when we're dealing with roll call and attendance especially. So some of those populations that you want to be careful of are LGBTQ plus students, international students, and there's a whole list that we could go through, but some of those students with disabilities. So how do we make sure that we can take care of these students and make sure that we don't share more information than they want us to share about them, and so that they feel welcome? So one of the problems is a lot of people will, to take attendance on the first day of class, print out the roster and just have students sign in. And that can be difficult, for instance, for trans students or non-binary students who might not be going by the name that's on the official class roster. So I would suggest not handing out a paper roster the first couple weeks of class. And there's a better way to do it so that they don't feel excluded. This can also hurt your international students, for instance, if they want to go by a different name. So a lot of international students have given up on people getting their names correctly and have chosen a Western name. And so they might not want other people to see their name on the roster as it goes around. So to protect them, I would say don't have a paper roster you hand out, but also don't say, okay, everyone say here when I say your name, because you're also they have to tell you who they are, right? Like if I'm going by the name Jack and you call out Jill, and I'm not going to feel comfortable with you probably for the rest of the semester. And then I'm not going to feel welcomed in class, because you do need to know who's there, but there's a better way. So any questions about why paper attendance or a roll call is not really great for the first couple weeks? Okay, so instead of making students out themselves by doing a roll call or roster, separate attendance and introductions. So do introductions, but let them tell you and the class what they want to be called. So invite them to, when you say, let's all introduce ourselves, or however you're going to do it, let them say the name that they want to go by, not have to tell you their official names. And give them time to think first before you say like, okay, we're going to go ahead. Let them also introduce themselves in small groups first so they can get a little bit more comfortable. But instead of doing a paper or a roll call attendance sheet, I would suggest that you do a first day of class student survey. We actually call them passports in PFF's class. So what they do is, it's a great way for you to get to know your students. It's going to be just a worksheet or it can be an assignment in Canvas if you want to do an online class. They can also email it to you. Like several ways for them to get this information to you, but have several questions. Like, what's their official name on the roster? What's their student ID number? Because you need those things. But then ask them, like, what do they want to be called in class? Ask them, like, just things to get to know them. What are their career plans? Why are they taking this class with you? And I would say two of the most important questions are, why or how can you help them succeed in this class? They might have some great ideas for your whole class, actually. And then the next thing is there anything you would like me to know? I won't share this with the class. I've actually had some great feedback from students about this question because it lets them talk to you privately. So it might be a student that has a disability and so needs an accommodation in the class, and this is a good like prompt for them to actually get in there and talk to you privately. It could be a student who is transitioning and they want to let you know what their pronouns are, for instance. Or it could be, it's something as simple as in one class, I had a bunch of track students in class and they wanted to let me know that they might have to miss class every now and then. But that let me know up front what was going on with them, and so I could better address their needs as class went forward.
Shelby,
yes.
Jonathan has a raised hand.
Oh, I don't see anything. What's up, Jonathan?
Jonathan, where are you? Go ahead, Jonathan. You have to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to mention someone's question. Was it okay to pass around a sign-in sheet and have people sign in their own names? I think you responded to it, Shelby.
Yeah, so I would say if you hand out a blank sign-in sheet and let students write their own names in, I think that's great. But as long as you are clear that they can write the name they want to go by, and then I would also have maybe like a column to let them put their ID numbers, so that way you could double check that whose name belongs to who. And then once you have that first week or two, so you don't have any new students come in, you can just use the names that they told you they want to go by on the roster and then hand those out for them to sign in that way.
Another comment from Dong. Citrus College rule writes that if a student does not attend the first class, he or she will be sent to the waiting list for the next class. That's pretty strict.
Yes.
Yeah, some colleges do that.
Yeah, I've heard of some colleges actually having students not just bumped to the waiting list, but actually like withdrawn from the class if they don't show up on the first day. Yeah, so you really have to make sure you know who's there. But there's an easier way, or not easier, there's a more community building way to do it for sure. All right, any other questions before I move on? All right. So these are some of the things you can put on that sheet. So the name, student ID number, anything they should know about, and how you can help them succeed in class. Icebreakers. Why do you think we do icebreakers? And what problems do you think icebreakers might pose in class? Feel free to unmute yourself and jump in. Yeah.
I think my understanding is the intention of icebreaker is to make people more comfortable, and I think sometimes it does the opposite. People uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. They can create a lot of anxiety.
And also to get to know your classmates so that you kind of see who the people are, you know. I mean, so you know, maybe who down the line you'll get to study with or whatever.
Exactly, right? You want to know who's in class with you. So right. It's our attempt to try and create some kind of community and getting to know each other. But it also can create anxiety. So I have some tips on how to do icebreakers in your class, and I'm welcome to have questions too. So first is how often? So it depends on your student demographics. But I would say use icebreakers actually throughout the whole semester. And don't just use the traditional icebreakers, but you can use icebreakers that are low key and safe, so they're not as anxiety producing to your students. But you should actually use icebreakers frequently, because the more frequently you do icebreakers, online and in person, the faster your community is going to build in your class. And the faster you get that community feeling, the better your students are going to perform, the better your discussions are going to be. It'll just make the class all around better. So, and I would suggest when you do icebreakers, you should do the icebreakers with the students. So if you're too anxious to do a particular icebreaker, your students probably are going to be too. So consider doing it with them and actually being the first one to do the activity to show that, like, this is how it should be done. I think often faculty don't join in on the icebreaker, and that can also create distance, artificial distance between you and your students.
Shelby, can I jump in right there? If you're really comfortable doing icebreakers, like you love them and you're really an extrovert and you do all of them really fun, then you have to maybe watch yourself. So you have no trouble doing them, but you may not be sensitive to students being very uncomfortable with the things you like to do. Mm-hmm. So it's watching that as well.
Yeah, and so a variety of different kinds of icebreakers are good as well. Okay,
I learned that the hard way.
Yes, extroverts and introverts have different times with icebreakers for sure. So which one or which ones? I would suggest, especially on the first day in particular, I always make sure I have about 3 icebreakers that are very different that I can pick from on the first day of class. So for instance, I would have an icebreaker that would include perhaps physical movement. But I can very quickly see that if that's going to be a problem for someone in my class, I won't do that one. I'll have some backup icebreakers I can use instead. Or if, you can kind of get a feel for your class on the first day. If you go in and everyone's very talkative and extroverted and everything, you're more likely to use a more extroverted activity. But if you get in there and everyone's pretty quiet, and it's going to be a pretty introverted class, you might start up with more of a low-key activity. So kind of having 3 activities in your pocket that you can just pull out is a really good way to make sure you're agile, depending on what you're actually going to be walking into in your class. So, and you want to make sure that you're not using an icebreaker that is going to exclude anyone. And there's a lot of ways icebreakers can exclude, and that's physical movement. You might have someone that has anxiety, and Shamini, what other things might exclude someone on an icebreaker?
Culture, if you're not used to sort of social interaction in a classroom space. Mm-hmm. So going very carefully with that, people just freeze, like, wait, I don't know how to do this. But I think the one I've seen the most is the physical movement. You have to go really gently with that, both for people who have trouble moving, but also generally the idea, you might have students in a class who've never been to a class that was friendly. Mm. So suddenly being social and moving is a big problem. So easing into that is important.
Yeah, and I would say culturally, another thing to be careful of, or socioeconomically, is if you give an icebreaker that's like, okay, who's your favorite character from a TV show or something, you might have an option say, okay, who's your favorite TV show from this, who's your favorite character from this TV show, but also have another option. They can, instead of that, they could select what's their favorite book, because someone might not have seen that TV show, and might not be in their native language. And so they're not going to be able to pick. And so that makes a student super anxious. So also having options can really help as well.
I had a question.
Mm-hmm.
Can you do icebreakers online?
Absolutely. And I've got some for you. Yes, you can do icebreakers online and in person. And some of them can be used online and in person. You just have to switch them up a little bit. So I have a list I'll share with you in just a moment. The other thing I was going to say was allow students to opt out. So if they are feeling super anxious, let them say pass if they don't want to do an icebreaker in particular. You know, that we want to build community, but we also don't want to exclude students who are super anxious. And it might be just that one particular icebreaker that you've chosen that they have a problem with. So just giving them a pass option is really good. Also, a low stakes activity, don't put any points associated with, you know, your first couple icebreakers. It's just supposed to be a fun activity. And when you put points associated with it, it really puts more pressure on a student. So what are—
And Shelby, when you say points, you mean, just clarifying, like a competition, you get 2 points, not graded.
Either
just
way.
points for playing a game.
Yeah,
right?
so I would say don't have it be a competition at the start, because competition doesn't build community in the same way. But also, yes, don't put a grade on an icebreaker at the start of class either. Okay, so what are some icebreakers? One of my favorites is desert island activity. So this is where you actually put students into groups and say, you're stranded on a desert island. What 3 things are you going to take with you that you can get off the island? So they have to discuss, they have to agree on something. They can have one spokesperson in case there's someone with anxiety who doesn't want to talk to the whole class. And it gives them a little bit of a just low stakes problem to kind of work on with each other. I think that students really kind of enjoy it. And sometimes I say, okay, you can't use anything with electricity to get off the island. So they have to think a little bit harder. And then another one you could do is think, write, share in pair or groups. So like, if you could be any person for a day, who would you be and why? What would you do? So these are like interesting ones. And so for the, and then I'll tell you how to do these both online and in person in just a second. Another great one, I think, Shamini actually told me this one, is make a list of simple contrasts like cats or dogs, or tea or coffee, or like things, sunny days or rainy days. And so then students can, if you're in a classroom, have them like get up and move to whichever side of the class, like that contrast pair that they like. So all the dog people on the right side, all the cat people on the left side. This kind of gives them a sense of community. They can look around and see like, oh, I'm in the group that really likes football, or I'm in the group that really likes baseball. And they can see like, you know, they can automatically see what things they have in common with each other. And then
can I add that I use that a lot when I have people who I'm not sure are comfortable with physical movement. And this is a neat little way to edge in, because the physical thing they have to do is very task oriented, and it's not a big physical thing. It's just go here or go there, but they get comfortable being with each other in these different physical groups. And the other thing is the contrasts have to be completely innocuous, silly, neutral. Tall trees or short trees, you know, silly things. Nothing truly a debate.
Yeah, you don't want to get political or anything like
exactly.
that. You don't want to create divisions in your class on the first day. Yeah. And then one other example for this slide is drawing. I think this one is hilarious. It can really bring humor into the classroom, and I really enjoy it as well. So be careful and make sure everyone has the ability to draw, but also tell them it can be stick figures if they want, you know, don't make them, but it's, so have someone, tell your students to imagine an imaginary creature, and tell half the class they have to draw the head of this imaginary creature. And then the other half has to draw the body of this imaginary creature. Then after they're done drawing, everyone gets up and tries to find the best fit with their heads and bodies. And that way they have to go around and kind of talk and compare, but you know, they don't have to be like great artists or anything. But it's also nice to engage students in a different way, because a lot of classes are very word focused or number focused. And so just letting them be a little artistic and funny can really like break that ice really well. so how you can do these online as well. You could do breakout groups in Zoom for Desert Island, or you could even do this in a discussion type way. So you can assign them a discussion board, and each group can use the discussion board to decide what their 3 items are going to be. So who could I be and why? This could also be a discussion board posting that students share. You could have students, actually the Desert Island, if I could, this or that, all of those could be discussion board posts for sure. And then the drawing, if you had a synchronous class where it was going on at the same time, you could just pause class, let everyone draw at their desk. Usually everyone has a pen and paper, and then they can just hold up their drawing so that everyone can see, and they can just kind of, they could vote and say, okay, whose pictures should Shelby's, head go with? That's an easy way for you to translate that to online. And then I have 4 more examples. This one is actually a good one, especially on the second day of class. It can be really interesting. So put them in groups and have them work on an interesting puzzle or problem. It's kind of like the Desert Island one, but you can actually make it associated with your actual content, but they don't have to know. So it's like, it can be associated with your class, but maybe they don't actually know the right answer yet, or maybe there isn't a right answer. So for instance, you could have them, I teach religion, so you could have them, how would you define religion? And they can just get in a group and talk about their definitions, no right or wrong answers. But it's a great way for them to kind of problem solve together a little bit, but low stakes, no right or wrong answers.
Shelby,
Mm-hmm.
I used to teach English Lit, and one of the things they would do on the first day in this working on a problem together would be, so how would you promote a Shakespeare festival? This was when I was teaching in Singapore. And they'd really figure things out. It was really relevant because we were studying Shakespeare, and it's 400 years old, and this is in Singapore. So the idea of relevance. So the first day they start addressing it, and they have a lot of fun with it. Mm-hmm. So relevant things like that would be, very useful.
Yeah, one of the things I've seen in a religion class is they have to decide if football is a religion or not. Yeah, so they have to debate whether football is a religion or not, and that can be a fun way to start the discussion about what religion is on the first day. So another one you can do is, it's not necessarily an icebreaker in particular, but it can be, is to set up teams. So create small groups of students, maybe like a research team, a writing team, and set these teams up, and then have give them a way to communicate with each other. So either a discussion board, or have them exchange emails with each other. And this can be like a small group where people can, ask for notes or ask questions of each other. That creates a smaller community, especially in those larger classes. And this lets them just have smaller people that they actually get to know. Discussion threads, we kind of talked about this already, but online, have them just discuss about themselves, why they might like something and why it's good. And then finally, I would suggest this for both online and in-person classes, is have your students upload profile pictures to whatever LMS you're actually on. So that can really help, especially for online, but it can also help for in-person classes, just to let everyone get to know each other's names. If you're going to use a discussion, you can use discussion boards in an in-person class as well as part of the assignments. So really encourage students to do that. You might run across a student who really doesn't want to put their picture up for some reason, and I wouldn't force them to put their picture up if they really don't want to, but I would suggest then they need to come up with an alternative picture to add. So maybe do a self-portrait, or I don't know, there's websites that will draw you as an anime character or something if they don't actually want to use a physical picture of themselves. Or you can, I know there's things that'll turn you into an emoji and stuff like that. So
someone had a question on chat. a little earlier, but this might be a place to address it. Does playing music like rock and roll before class count as an icebreaker? And is it more like an atmosphere builder than an icebreaker, and it can go through the semester? But that was the question.
So it can be both. So I found that actually having some upbeat music, yeah, exactly. I like the picture. Having some really upbeat music can really help people kind of feel at ease when you come into the class. I have done like symphony music as well, but it tends to put students to sleep. So they kind of relax, but they relax too much. And so upbeat music for sure is a great way to get class started. And it encourages people to talk, actually. It gives them something to talk about. And something you can do to turn it into an icebreaker is each day you can play a different song and have students be like, okay, what do you think of this song? Or you can ask them for suggestions for next week. And YouTube can be a great place to get any song for free and just have it playing in the background. But do remember to turn it off, because I have forgotten before in a class to turn off the music because the speakers were towards them and not towards me, and I couldn't hear it. And about 10 minutes in, they were like, can you turn off the music? It's like, we can't focus. So don't forget to turn off the music if you use that option. Yeah. All right. So that's all about icebreakers. So now I just want to talk about how to foster engagement in class. And where are we on time? Okay, we're trucking right along. So I would ask, why are students, I really want you to consider this, why are students taking your class? Like, I think about why they're actually there. And if they know why they're there, they're going to connect with your materials so much more. So what you should do is tell them how this class is going to help them in their career, in whatever subject they're taking, and their personal lives. If you can make that connection for them, they're going to take your class more seriously. They're going to show up more engaged. And if it just connects to their real life. So how many times have you heard like this cliche of like, oh, this, calculus class, how am I ever going to use this in my real life? Well, tell them how they're going to use it in real life. Even for something that might be obvious to you, might not be obvious to them. So for instance, a religion, intro to religion class they're going to be like, why would I ever use this? Well, it's actually really important in politics, in the news, in the media. And by showing them those examples, they'll be more engaged with class because they see why it's actually important. And then the next thing is, do you like the subject you're teaching? Does that come across to your students? So like, this might be the 6th intro to English class that you're teaching, and you're just like, do you actually like your subject? Because if you're just showing up and going through the motions and like, okay, I know it's really hard, but you've got to fake enthusiasm if you're not enthusiastic about your class. Like, if you love what you're doing, your students are going to feel that and feel more engaged. It's going to make, even if they don't care about English, they're going to be more caring about that subject if you show that you care a lot about it and you are enthusiastic. I mean, being a professor is kind of a performance. So you've sometimes got to put on, not like a show, like theatrical, you're giving them context and stuff, but like, sometimes you're going to wake up grumpy and not want to be in class, just like they are, right? But you've got to put on that face and show them that you're enthusiastic about the material. So they're also enthusiastic about it, because it'll help them perform better. And it'll help them learn and remember the material better too. So any questions on engagement?
I had a question about the icebreaker.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask before I forgot it. So even though the teacher should participate, should the teacher participate first? Like if it's items you would want on a desert island, or would that influence their responses?
I think it's perfectly fine if you would say what you would take, or if you want to say, I'll share last or something, but showing that you're actually going to work on it too, I think is important. If you've got a TA in the class, it could be good for you and your TA to be one of the teams. and then you could go first, you know. It makes it feel like you're actually participating as one of them and not separating yourself out. And, you know, you're not like, there's no correct or wrong answer. So if they see what you do and want to use some of the same things, it's not like a big deal. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I used to ask when I taught Art 1, I would ask all of my students what their favorite cartoon character was. Mm-hmm. And so that was something they would introduce each other by remembering each other's cartoon character. And so I would come around last and I would say, my favorite cartoon character is Jane from the animated movie Tarzan, because she loves to teach and she loves to draw and she loves to hang out with wild things. And that's why I teach high school art, you know? So
yeah,
that was always something that it made them laugh. And, you know, they could tell that they were, you know, they could be themselves, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great idea.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So just a few more minutes here. And I was just going to leave you with a couple ideas in general. This isn't necessarily about the first day of class, but teaching is a skill, and this isn't something someone is necessarily born with. So you're going to have several first days of class, hopefully many. So just practice them. And one of the things I would say is just prepare for difficult situations. So ask other educators about which tough situations have they been in, and then think about what would you do in those type of situations. The more you can think about what ifs, the better prepared you'll actually be for if something happens. Reflect. So after that first day of class, what could have been better? But what worked great too? What do you want to keep doing? And then what assumptions did you make? Did you assume anything about the students that were in your class, or make any assumptions about how it went? So just kind of reflecting after each class. And I would suggest keeping a journal as well, because sometimes I'll think, oh, I should do this next time, and then I forget by the time it's time to do it again. So keeping a journal can actually be great. And then lastly is everyone makes mistakes. The important thing is that you learn from them and keep growing. I remember the mistakes I make in class, especially first day mistakes, those stick with me. So forgive yourself, move on, and learn from your mistakes. So any other questions, concerns? There's also you can see the slides I have at the link on the screen. You can also visit our website, make an appointment with us. We have webinars, resources, and the certificate. So anything you all need. Any questions, comments, anything you would suggest for next time? All right, well, everyone, thank you for being with me today. I'm going to give you just a few minutes to hang around and ask any questions if you want, but thanks for being here. And I hope this helps you with your first day of class going forward.